everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 8 of Trigun. And I don't know if I should do the rule of 8 for Trigun because there's 26 episodes, so it's like, usually with the rule of 8 on my channel, it's if it's like an 11 to 13 episode series or a core. And with retro anime, I don't think that they necessarily have cores. I think back then they were just commissioned for 24 to 26 episodes, or in Death Note's case, 37. But yeah, I feel like that I don't think the rule of 8 may apply to this episode, but I'm hoping it does, because last episode was set up as a one part of 2, where we had the Sand Steamer getting overtaken by BDN, who is a very, very fashionable antagonist. And we've got confirmation that the little boy that we'd seen earlier in like episodes 5 and 6 actually is the son of the man that created the Sand Steamer. And so he has kind of an investment in the ship, not wanting to get it blown up. And as we left, it was kind of like a Titanic situation where BDN has the Sand Steamer going towards a cliff, so it will blow up and crack open the vault that they can rob. And the problem with that is, of course, it's going to kill everyone in the process on the Sand Steamer. So Vash has found himself enlisted alongside the boy to try to save the Sand Steamer, the people involved, and put BDN to justice. No big deal, right? But there's a lot going on, and I'm really, really excited, but I've got some comments I want to go through before we go any further. Alex Cornejo talked about in episode 6 that Elizabeth leading Vash along like a puppy dog was very reminiscent to the power dynamics, no pun intended, between two characters from Chainsaw Man, specifically the characters of Makima and Denji. And that's all I'll say about that without spoiling anything. But it also makes sense why, I thought this was interesting, why Meryl doesn't initially want to believe that Vash is who he says he is. At first, the first couple of episodes we thought, oh, well, Meryl just doesn't want to admit Vash is Vash the Stampede because of how goofy he acts. But Alex Cornejo pointed out that, after episode 6 and stuff, knowing that Vash has been around and hasn't aged in like nearly 15 to 20 years, yeah, it makes sense that Meryl, who's heard all these things about Vash the Stampede, was expecting a middle-aged man, not a guy that looks like he's in his early 20s. So yeah, that makes a lot more sense about why Meryl's kind of like, how are you who you say you are? That doesn't make sense. The timeline doesn't add up, right? So that's interesting. Also, Ka gives some voice actor information. The Nebraska family, the professor is actually the same voice actor that plays Gran Torino on My Hero Academia, and he's 81 years old now, which is so crazy that he's still voice acting in his 80s. That's amazing. Josef's VA is also currently 77, and he played the original Cell in Dragon Ball Z, as well as Vicious from Cowboy Bebop. I'm like, oh man, could you imagine playing like Cell and Vicious, like two huge antagonistic roles, and then you're also Josef Nebraska? I imagine that he was Josef Nebraska before he was the other roles, so it's kind of like, man, a glow up in the voice acting world, right? And then the town mayor from episode 5 was also played Whitebeard in One Piece and sadly passed away in 2019 at the age of 78. So really cool to see a lot of veteran voice actors in this series, and several that are still voice acting today. That's kind of cool to see like the origins of them going on. I think of Dio's voice actor, who also plays Alba on Neon Genesis. Like, he's still voice acting today and has such an iconic voice. And so that's really cool. I love that. But yeah, I thought those comments were really good. I have really been enjoying Trigun. The last couple episodes have been adding to the mystery, adding to the story, and now here we are. It's a 26 episode series for the OG Trigun, so this is gonna be like a fourth of the way done, right? Or a third of the way done, actually. Like, we're nearly to a third of the way through the series, and we're getting into some conflict, we're getting into more to Vash, so there's a lot there that's really, really cool, and I'm really excited about it. So we'll see what happens, right? But we're not going to waste any more time, y'all. We are going to dive right in and see what we get. So we are going to start episode 8 of Trigun. And I nearly forgot that I was going to need to have these for it. So I'm going to hook up these to there right now. I'm going to get the stopwatch already. I was just ready to dive in. Was just like, oh no, we're totally fine. Everything is great. But we're not going to waste any more time, y'all. I hope y'all enjoy this episode. I've been really, really excited to see what all we're going to get with Vash and this whole thing with BDN and rounding it all out, because it left on a cliffhanger, and I was like, really, show, you going to do this to us? But of course they do. So without further ado, get everything set up here. Here we go. We're going to actually start episode 8 of Trigun now and just see what we get, y'all. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this, y'all. This was a really good conclusion to a two-parter. And that's kind of hard to do, right? Because if you have, 2 parts of an anime and you're trying to like round everything out, because, it was like the question is, how do we stop the sand steamer from going over the cliff? Which I'm glad we got confirmation that it was going over the edge of a cliff. In the last episode, I thought it was going to just ram into the cliff and then break the vault, which at the time, I'm like, knowing this now, I'm like, BDN, you were going to go over the edge of a cliff? How'd you think you were going to survive that? But he said that he was going to get into his ship and escape the sand steamer before it went out. But then I'm like, how are you getting down the cliff to get the treasure? Like, that seems like a bottomless pit. Like, you got a tram like SpongeBob that's going to go down and bring you back up? I was like, that part did have a couple holes in the argument of how they were going to get down to the sand steamer to get the loot after they destroyed it. But I do like the resolution that we get, where I like that it's tied to Kaite. We get his name finally. I like this tied to Kaite, that he's the one that stops the ship. It kind of comes full circle with his dad and everything. And I like the fact that BDN, we'll talk about his confrontation with Vash, actually is the one that in the end saves the ship from going in. It's a nice character resolve, and it's done so in a very clean and concise way. I'm sure that there'd be people arguing about, we'll talk about BDN's character. We'll talk about his character in all of this. But I'm sure there's some people that would be like, oh, it wrapped up too cleanly, but I'm fine with it. I liked the fact that the boy was the one that stopped the ship. I like the fact that and the whole thing with BDN and Kaite is the idea that even though if you've done something bad, even though if you've committed an act or a crime in your past, that does not mean you can't become a better person and do a good thing in the future. I think that's something that's still so true today, that a lot of people, they believe that if you've done something bad in your life, you are destined for the rest of your life to only do bad things. And that is not true. There are so many people that made mistakes in their past and they're like, damn it, I did something I shouldn't have done. But it doesn't condemn them to a life of wrongdoing. Like, they can turn around and do the right thing in the future. It's just the fact of people believing in them that they will do that. And Kaite, it took Vash giving him that words of thumbs up, because it seems like Vash may be in a similar boat. I mean, he's wanted for murder and causing all this destruction, but yet we've seen Vash try time and again to do the right thing. So Vash is a clear example, I feel, of someone who also is struggling with that past they had and moving towards a better future for themselves. So I really like that. I was like, I'm totally on board with that for their character. I'm like, yes, that seems like a logical thing for their character to have happen to them. So sure. But yeah, this episode was really good. And there was lots of little tiny things, little breadcrumbs that were introduced as well, that I was like, hell yes. Let's get more into Vash's mystery with his character. I liked the OP gave us like virtually nothing. The OP gave us virtually nothing spoiler-wise, except for Vash having the bullets all go around him. We'll talk about that whole sparkle thing. That's interesting. But yeah, so BDN talking about there's only 12 minutes left. A reasonable deadline. And he's like, we're just going to get out of here. Don't you worry. I'm going to take my thread that's embedded in my costume and get out of here. Tether it back to my ship. So the episode is called Between Wasteland and Sky. The idea of the space between the mortal and, ethereal realm there, right? Which I think is rather fitting for this episode, because it talks about morals and how we change for the future and how we secure our destiny in the world beyond, which just kind of seemed like Vash is trying to do right by Rim, right? What I love about Vash, I mean, the facial expressions, the chibi expressions, everything in this episode was absolutely hilarious, which I appreciated and loved dearly. But one thing that was so funny is that Vash, what we have to realize as the audience is that Vash cannot read Kaite's mind. Kaite is going on this whole existential crisis with him and his father, and what does he do with the ship, and why did he do things, and what's going to happen. He's mulling through all of this drama and trauma in his head, and we're just kind of following along. Vash has no clue this is happening. So when Vash sees Kaite just being kind of sorrowful and melancholy, he's like, hey, snap out of it. We got things to do, right? And Vash's go-to emotion to help cure someone of their depression is to be goofy and hammy and be a flaky ham, as Kaite says. And so he's like, what are the baddie laddies planning to do? And I like that Vash is like, oh, this is a really bad thing. They're going to drop it in the cliff. I love the line, death and poverty like me so much they brought friends. That line is so terrifyingly sad and hilarious. Death and poverty like me so much they brought friends. I'm reading the story Heaven Official's Blessing at the same time that I'm watching this, and it's a Chinese Don Mai, but the main character, Shi Lian, is very similar to Vash, a little bit similar to Vash. I see parallels, especially because bad luck seems to follow Shi Lian wherever he goes, a lot like Vash. And so that line, death and poverty like me so much they brought friends, that is something I could definitely apply to Heaven's Official Blessing. I feel like that would very much apply. I love that. Not to mention the insurance girls. The insurance girls are they're just like two of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? That follow Vash around. I love that Meryl and Millie introduce themselves to BDN like, we're from this insurance company. Like, we're obligated to say the insurance company as part of our job so that we get paid. I'm like, girl, where are you even getting the checks? You guys are on the road so much. But the big crux of this is Kaite's relationship with his dad. And I felt like the episode, it gave us just enough information. It gave us just enough info. We see his good-for-nothing workaholic dad. And it's one of those things where Kaite, his character, clearly had an impression of his father as a child, saying that he was just too busy with his work to pay attention to his son. But then the more we get to go back, usually if you have like a traumatic thing happen in your past, you tend to focus on that. And it tends to all consume that memory. And so sometimes if you don't intentionally think about it a certain way, it's very common for a bad memory to be the focal point, and you kind of forget about the good things that happen around it. It's easy to focus on the negative and forget the good that comes along with it because the negative takes precedence. And so at first you see like his dad just focused on building the sand steamer and like his plans and everything and not paying attention to his son. But then as the episode goes on and you get more of the flashback, you see that his dad did care about his son a lot. It's just him being absorbed with his work is what stands out to Kaite more so at first than the love that his father was giving them. And at the end, when Kaite's alone, as he's reflecting on that, he realizes, my dad did love me. It just sucks that I didn't get to spend as much time as I wanted to with him. And you get the full context of that scene, which is really well done. I liked the way that this episode handled that, right? And the idea of seeing him like looking at his dad, and at first he seems very like, you don't see him hardly at all, and it seems like it's going to be like a very tragic backstory, but then later on when you come back and you see the dad smiling with his son and talking to him and holding him, you realize, okay, it wasn't as bad as we thought, right? But the bad stands out to Kaite. And I love that Vash interrupts the flashback. He's like, hey, we need to get back to the main plot line. It's almost breaking the fourth wall where Vash is like, we ain't got time for the flashback. Let's get back to the main story. I love it. I haven't seen that happen in a while in a series where a character deliberately interrupts the flashback. But he's like, we've got no time for this. And so the sand steamer is called the Flourish, which is, we talk about flora and fauna and everything in this. Interestingly enough, the Flourish, because we're in the middle of a desert, so there's not a lot of plants and flora and fauna around. We've not seen, like, other than the Thomases, we've seen no animals, no plants. It's been pretty much deserted, right? But the Flourish makes it sound like it's an oasis, which it kind of is. It literally is an oasis, a hub of community and resources in the middle of this desert where there is nothing. So I think that name for it is very symbolic, right? And he's like, how did you get this? And he's like, it's not the real one. I copied it from my dad's workplace when I was a kid. Yeah, from when he was a kid. Like Kaite is naturally very talented and copied the blueprint his father gave him as a child. And it looks that authentic. It's like, that's absolutely insane, right? I like Vash, like, this is something, right? And then he says, and then we see, that's the thing, we go back to the flashback a few minutes later, and we see the dad, and the dad doesn't look like Gendo. He looks like, he says, become the kind of person who does things for others. Yeah. And then he says, for me, it was the sand steamer. And I love that he's like holding his son as he talks to him about it. He's like, what are you going to devote your life to? For me, the sand steamer was going to be this thing for other people that I devoted myself to. What are you going to do? And the funny thing is that we don't, by the end of this episode, know what Kaite is going to devote himself to. We just know he is going to devote himself to something, which is good. He's going to devote himself to helping others. And I love that, like, he has this emotional moment where he's like crying and he's like, what's there for someone like me to do? And that's a sentiment I think Vash can connect with, because Vash too is like, well, how can I help these people? But he still, as we've seen in this season so far, he has helped people, or tried to, everywhere he's gone to. But I love Vash's headbutting being like, now is not the time to get sentimental. I love the way they phrase that. He's like, no, you can cry after this episode is over, right? He's like, what? Don't get on me, you little squirt. And then we have the guards going after there. I like that it is very apparent that Vash, when he's firing his gun, he's just disabling the guards. He is not intentionally trying to kill them. He does take their guns though, right? And they go where all the voice tubes were. And so they set this idea in motion. I like the little chess game that Vash and BDN play with one another, because Vash is trying to lure BDN out. BDN catches on and tries to lure Vash to the location to trap him. Like, it's a nice chess game without acknowledging to the audience that it's a chess game, right? Because so often in anime and manga, it's like, now we'll play the game against one another, you know, and it's just very obvious what they're setting up symbolically. But here it's done so casually that you almost forget that these two are playing such a thing between them. And I love Vash's little note that he says, so funny, and it says, copyright Vash TS The Stampede. Ridiculous. I love that he puts a copyright there. And BDN is a very interesting antagonist, because he seems ruthless at times and very much dedicated to his ideas of how to do things. But then in the same vein, he also is very respectful of people that challenge him the appropriate ways. Like, he's respectful towards Vash and acknowledges him as like a true warrior or whatever. He seems to like revel in the fact that he's found a worthy opponent, right? And everybody else is like, we just don't want this sand steamer to crash, please. And they're like, bring me the blonde or else. And I love that Vash like imitates the guard and like acts a fool. And the boy Kaide's like, you're such a ham. Like, you're really going overboard with this, right? And then he's like, I don't want to walk into a bunch of them in a narrow passageway. And so he gives Kaite what looks like a cigar, but it's also a pin, and it's a microphone, like it's a walkie-talkie device that he gives him to speak through, and says, here, this will allow you to speak to me, so that way you can inform me if there are guards coming in the passageway, and vice versa. And he's like, if you talk into it, I'll hear you. And then that's when Kaite's like, now wait a minute. He's like, what are you doing with this lost technology? Who are you? I'm like, okay. So Kaite's been around his dad, who's an inventor, who his dad has probably told him about lost technologies throughout the years. So Kaite kind of knows, like, hey, we don't have these anymore. This isn't just vintage and retro. This is something that was like the light bulbs. He's like, how do you have this? Who are you? You seem young enough. You should not have access to this. And the answer that Vash gives is like, I would explain it to you, but you wouldn't believe me, and there's no time. Which is the most realistic answer you can give for this episode, because one, they literally have 10 minutes. There is no time. But also, I'm like, what a damn tease, telling me that you wouldn't believe it. I'm like, at this point, I just watched you absorb a lot of radiation energy. I think I would believe it, but okay, fine, wait. So there is clearly, that is a sign for us, the audience, that Vash is going to tell us what's going on with him at some point. At some point, we're going to find out. Just not today. And I'm like, curse you, Trigun! Curse you, Trigun, and your mysteries. And so when he goes outside, though, he says, see ya, and he turns back to make a goofy face at the kid to make him kind of forget about it and not worry about it. And that's when the soldiers, like, point the gun at him. And I love that Vash, like, that face that Vash makes, and I'm going to take a picture of it because it's really, really good. the face that Vash makes is one where he's immediately surprised, like, oh shit, I wasn't paying attention. I got caught off guard. And when he went to get his gun, that's when he got fired at. But he shot the man without realizing it. He shot him out of reflex. And he's like, why does it? He's like GD'd a few times so far in this episode. I'm like, Vash is getting a little worked up. Why does it start like this? He's like, I screwed up. They're bleeding bad and I have to help them. And that's when Kaite's like, you mean you've been trying not to kill them this entire time? And he's like, yeah. And Kaite's like, I like that Kaite says, I can't understand you. Kaite's like, you are an enigma. You're sitting here trying to save the ship, but you're not killing the He's like, I don't understand how this works. Like, how can you be this way? I love that, where he's like, no matter how good of a shot you are, you're going to get yourself killed. And that's the thing. It's not that Kaite thinks that him sparing the goons is a bad thing necessarily. That's not what he's saying. He's just saying, like if you don't fight back and stop them by killing them, you're going to get killed. He's like, I don't understand why you think that that's a risk that you can take. You know, that's what he's worried. He's worried about Vash getting killed, not necessarily other guys not being stopped. And Vash, like, he can see that he's bleeding, like, on his side, which they make the blood look like a different color, a different shade at all times from here on in, so that red on red, you can distinguish the two. And Vash, he just kind of chuckles at this moment, like this dark chuckle, and says, I guess it is kind of stupid of me. He's like, but it's true. It's sloppy, and I probably shouldn't have done it this way. He says, but you know what? I made a promise. If I put out even one flame of life, it would make her sad. So, her is Rim, obviously, because he keeps having flashbacks about her in the song. But, so he made a promise to her he would kill no one else. So, that tells us that there's a possibility that the person he did kill is tied to her death. And my guess is that the guy that he supposedly has killed is the one that killed Rim. And maybe he killed Rim, and before she died, she was like, hey, don't kill anybody else. Like, it's not worth it. I don't want you stained with death on your hands just because of me. Like, don't kill anybody else. So, but that's interesting, though, because Vash says he's on a mission to find someone. So, if he's not going to kill him, what's he going to do? Because he made a promise not to kill anymore. So yeah, there's a little mystery there. But yeah, Vash promising he wouldn't kill anybody. And then the boy, like, tells him to go. And so I like that Kaite talks to him saying that you've got to stop underestimating the entire human race. He's like, you think that you can do all of these things, these inhuman things, and we won't be able to stop you. He's like, but you're underestimating people. He's like, you're going to end up getting killed because you're underestimating the lengths that people would go to. And then we get more of the boy's flashback where he sees his dad and his mom leaving him there. So the question is, I mean, we can obviously try to fill in the blanks and say that, okay, when he was a little kid, around the time the sand steamer was finished, his parents left maybe to get on the sand steamer for like its maiden voyage, and then the boy was left behind. Why, we don't know. But then we say, here lies Richard Trevisick, died September of 0128. Okay, so we can assume that his name is Kaite Trevisick. That's probably the name of him, and then his dad was Richard Trevisick. So the thing about it is 1028, right? 1020 or 0128. So 128 is the year. We know that in the July massacre was 0114, right? That was that time period. So that was 14 years prior. So if we think about this, that boy, Kaite, looked to be about like 5 or 6 maybe when his dad left, and now he looks to be probably like 11 or 12. So it's been possibly like, let's say, I mean, the boy looks like, let's say, if we were going to say that Kaite right now is 14. Let's say he's 14. Maybe. I don't know if the last episode they told us his age. Let's say he's 14 and he was like 6 back when he was left behind. So it's been 8 years since then. Let's say, but let's go back to this. So 12, 8. Because then after that, we see the little boy, we see him wandering around the desert, kind of like Vash a little bit, and then eating out of the garbage bins. And that's when BDN gives him the money to offer him to help, right? And there he is. So let's say 12. Let's say he's 12, right? Because it probably hasn't been that long. And let's say he was 8 when he was left by his parents. Let's just go with that. So it's been 4 years. 4 years seems reasonable, maybe. So let's just say it's been 4 years since 12/8. So it would be 32. And it was 14. So 32, I'm not a math person, as you can tell as I'm going through this discussion, because it's just like, okay, so if the actual year is 0132, then going back 22, so it's been like 18 years probably since the July incident. We're going to say nearly 20 years, possibly 15 to 20 years since the July incident, and Vash has not aged a bit. Okay, that gives me okay a little bit more with the timeline, right? And the kid's saying, like, I've done all these bad things. Like, who's going to forgive me? What should I do? And Vash says, then just start over. Vash, you can tell, knows exactly what the boy is going through. He's like, I get what you're going through. I'm going through the same thing myself. He's like, it sucks that you've done something bad in your past, but the only thing you can do is move forward and start over. Just start with a clean slate. Just try your best. Not everybody's going to understand it. It's going to be hard, but that's all you can do to keep from like slipping further into the darkness. Yeah. So, and Kaite actually goes through it in this episode because the ship's crew members, they're just a bunch of assholes. He's like trying to help them stop the ship, and they can't forgive him. They can't move forward. And Kaite's like, well then fine. He's like, I could give in and be the monster that they expect me to be, but instead, no, I'm just going to handle it myself. Because that's what Vash told me I should do. I've got to do right. I've got to pay for the things I've done. Because, yeah, I mean, the crew member's not wrong. Kaite did, inadvertently cause the death of his crew member. So he has every right to be mad. But Kaite is trying to do right. He's like, the only thing I can do is prove to these people that I'm trying to do right and try to solve the problem and help them, despite the fact that they're not being forgiving of me. And that's what he ends up doing, right? And it's such a good character moment. I love the moment Vash opens up the door and they're all standing there waiting on him. That's such a badass, cool moment. And they all fire around him. They all fire around him and it misses. Now, BDN says, you sparkle well. Very impressive. And I don't know if that's a thing. If that is a thing. If the sparkle is like some kind of natural aura or barrier that people have around them, that certain people have, where it naturally like shields them from harm and then it helps protect them. It's like good luck in a way, because they said, oh, he's very lucky, he has a devil's luck, and BDN says that's not luck, he has a sparkle to him. So that almost seems like a world building thing. Like there's something in this world, people have auras around them that protect them naturally from harm. And the bigger the sparkle, the more likely they are to be protected. Which is kind of fascinating because it makes it to where, we've joked in previous episodes, and we joke a lot in anime that characters sometimes have like stormtrooper aim, like the people are firing guns at the villains are firing guns at the protagonist and they're missing left and right. And it's like, man, these people have terrible aim. But the thing about it is, it's not the aim at all. It's the fact. It's not the aim at all. It's just literally the fact that these characters may have like a supernatural aura or force field around them that helps protect them. Now, obviously it doesn't always work if you're shot point blank, but it's kind of like not a hockey from One Piece necessarily, but kind of. It just feels like a natural barrier that is around these characters. And I don't know if it's going to be a world building thing at all, or if it's just, symbolic, but I thought that was really, really cool. And then I love the BDN's gun revving up. And then that's when Derringer Meryl shows up. I love Meryl and Millie getting in this. I had forgot they were, at the beginning when we saw the little tanks going towards the minions, and then it was Vash and Kaite. I thought that was Millie and Meryl, and then when it wasn't, I kind of lost track of where they were in the episode. So when they show up, it's brilliant. It's a great plot twist. I love that Meryl's like, I'm Derringer Meryl, and I'm with the insurance company, and Millie's like, and yeah, I love that Millie's like, I need a nickname too. She's like, let's see, I'm Stun Gun Millie. It sounds very Wild West. It sounds like Pecos Bill and Billy the Kid, you know. It sounds like a very Wild West nickname. And I just love that Vash is just like, why are you getting involved? He's like, I don't want you involved. And Meryl's like, take care of them quickly, Mr. Vash the Stampede. Isn't that your name? Like, she's acknowledging him now. And Vash is like, fine. And so then they decide to face each other. We're going to settle it outside. I just love the standoff. This feels like Titanic and a Wild West movie and a shootout. It's so good. It's just a great mix of genres, right? But I love the idea that they just have this like duel against one another. And when the coin drops on the deck, that's when we go. I think it speaks a lot for BDN's character that he respects the rules of the duel, in that he doesn't shoot Vash before the coin lands, which he very well could have if he was a slimy character. And even when the rocks and stuff go and like interrupt their duel, he waits until the coin drops and hits the deck. And then he stops when he sees that Vash was fighting him with this severe injury already. He was like, well, this isn't a fair duel. We're not on equal terms. He didn't have to do that. He could have been a slime ball and just fired at him anyway. But BDN is a more respectful character than we give him credit for. And that shot where Vash, like that look in his face. Vash was super serious in this episode. Really serious, like with his wound and everything. I love that. I love that we're getting more of Vash being serious. And just being like, seeing this darker edge around Vash is interesting, along with the ham, right? It makes his character so much more fascinating. And BDN, they're like, well, boss, you could have just taken him out. And he says, nothing shines like hard-won fame. I love that. He has just enough vanity to him that he's like, I want to be seen as the flashy antagonist, like a man that glitters in my villainy. He's like, I don't want to be seen as a slime ball that did things underhandedly. He's like, I like that BDN says that people aren't going to respect me as a villain if I do things underhanded. I have to do things the correct way in order to get my villain card, right? I love that. I love that he talks about things shining and sparkling. It's fascinating. So yeah, and then I like that poor Vash, he's like injured, and Meryl's just sitting here like, why were you fighting in this condition? Why weren't you healing yourself? What are you doing? Well, Meryl's just giving him a hard time, and Millie just looks super concerned. But then, yeah, Kaite, he says, I have to pay for what I've done. I love that. I love that expression that he gives Vash, and then he goes in. And the thing about it is he gets on the pipes, burning himself, burning his hands, but he pulls the lever anyway, because that's what, you know, if he had just given up on humanity and lost hope in humanity, he would have let them all just die off the cliff. But he doesn't. Instead, he repents and sacrifices himself to save the people, to do something for others, which is what his father wanted him to do. And then BDN, who like respected Vash for fighting him even when he was critically wounded, decides it's just like, it's a pay it forward moment where like Vash's kindness and respect and courtesy, maybe not kindness necessarily because they were dueling to the death, even though I don't think Vash would have killed him, he pays it forward because he wants to save everybody on the ship, including Vash, so that Vash can fight him again one day. I'm like, it's basically like the Goku effect, or like the Ichigo effect from Bleach and Dragon Ball Z, where it's like they earn the respect of the villain, and the villain's like, well, I still want to fight you one day, but so I'm gonna like spare you so that we can fight again one day. I feel like it's a BDN acts like a Vegeta or a Grimjow, where he's like, well, we'll fight again one day, right? If I do this. And then Vash and the boy end up all right. He's like, I'm going to take your life. Count on it. And Vash is like, sure, come fight me again later. And then they get out of the sand steamer and they're on the edge of the cliff. And that's when, I love the cat's just sitting there. It's great. The cat's just sitting there. It's really super cute. I like the boy put his overalls on over his bandages. And then, yeah, he starts singing the song. And my dogs are going crazy. But you know what? He starts singing the same song that Rim sang. And the thing about it is that Vash is like, well, what are you doing? And you think for a moment, you think that the song is going to be something special, like a secret song that only certain people know. But instead, Kaite's like, oh yeah, I know it's an oldie, but I've heard it since I was a kid. I really like it. The song is just like a classic song on the radio. It's just, there's nothing special about the song. The song is something that a lot of people know. The funny thing is that it's just popular and that's why he's singing it. But Vash doesn't know that. He doesn't remember. So that tells us something too. He doesn't remember before the July incident. So he only remembers stuff from his childhood and before the July. The only thing he remembers before the July incident is stuff from his childhood. So the question is, the song that Rim sang, we know it's an oldie now. It's like an old classic song that a lot of people know, but it's an old song, so not everybody sings it currently. That's why it stands out to Vash when Kaite sings it. So the question is, did Rim die when Vash was a kid? And that's all he remembers is her singing the old song from when he was a kid? Or did she die after the July incident? I'm going to say she probably died when he was a kid, right? Or could that have been around the July incident and that's all he remembers? We don't know enough yet. We don't know enough. But the fact that it's an old song that likely Kaite's parents sang to him as a kid, and that's why he remembers it, and Vash remembers it, means that Vash is probably a lot older than he seems. So yeah, I love that. I love that this song we think has this very special, like secret individualized meaning is actually, no, it's just an old famous song. But that's all he knows about it, is that Rim sings it. And now he's learning that it maybe was something that Rim had known all along. Right? The sound of life. Yeah. And Rim's so pretty, like what we've seen of her so far. Vash is like, you're making me cry. And the boy thinks it's just him that's embarrassing, but it's like, no, it's just the song. Yes. Oh my God. So this was a really, really good episode. I liked this a lot. Again, like I said, it's a great ending to the two-parter. It just had a nice, clean, concise ending. It gave us more things to ponder about the mystery of Vash and how old he is and his past. But we get more of Vash's character development, his motivations, and how he wants to influence others. And we see that influence taking effect in the episodes. It's beautiful. Really good stuff. So yeah. I'm so excited for the next episode. I don't know if I'll be able to wait, but if this was a rule of 8, I think it was a successful rule of 8. So we'll see though for the next episode. So I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts down below. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Trigun. Bye!